Anti-free trade and anti-European Union platform.
Okay, folks.
CNN chief international correspondent Christiane Amanpour is on the...
Le Pen lost the election, folks. This is breaking news, CNN. And, that's a good thing or not. But this guy's, this so-called leader now, France. He worked for the Rothschilds, I think. This guy's an investment banker or some, yeah. So he worked for the Rothschilds. So I don't know if that's a good thing or not. And the Rothschilds are the part of the powers that be. But for now, Le Pen lost the election.
The Holocaust, on anti-Semitism, on inward looking, and his daughter Marine Le Pen did all she could to bring this past, ugly past, into the mainstream. And today France said no, we will not vote for that kind of hate and that kind of closed, inward looking future. And so this election has passed, the most important, as I said, in 60 years for this country, plus of course for Europe, because Marine Le Pen had threatened to collapse the entire EU, to get out of the euro, which would have collapsed the euro, to pull out of the EU with a referendum, which would have ended the EU, according to many European leaders. That would have been the end. And it would have been terrible for France. Her policies, most believe, would have bankrupted this country. Even conservative politicians who ran say that her economics were just voodoo and would have bankrupted this nation. Yeah. So France has dodged a bullet, Europe has dodged a bullet, and it is now fallen to Emmanuel Macron, 39 years old.
I hope you're right.
Youngest leader since Napoleon, to, as he said, face the challenges from tomorrow onwards. Try to heal a divided nation.
I'm not a big fan of Le Pen. Anti-immigrant and racist party, far-right Nazis. But this other guy, centrist guy, he worked for the Rothschilds, and I don't know. But we will see, folks.
Partnership.
Well, very importantly, President Donald Trump tweeted almost immediately that the results became clear to congratulate Emmanuel Macron, say, look,
his name is Macron, okay.
Spoke to Macron's spokeswoman. It's the only word that has come out of Macron headquarters since the result. And she said also that the democratically elected new president of France wants to work with the democratically elected president of the United States, even though he may have preferred Marine Le Pen. Now, this is the lay of the land, and there are many issues that these two countries...
Overstatement.
Notably, fighting ISIS and terrorism. Plus, of course, for France, the climate, very, very important. When Emmanuel Macron talked about the climate in his speech, there was a huge cheer that went up, because that's where the Paris Climate Accords were signed in 2015, and that's what many people around the world really feel very strongly about. They don't want America walking away from it. So Macron and Trump will probably meet, yes, they'll meet at the G7 in Sicily towards the end of this month, and that'll be their first opportunity to get to know each other. But on the other hand, equally important, the Russians wanted Le Pen to win, and there was a lot of interference by the Russians in these elections, just as there was in the United States, just as there...
Those Russians again. Those pesky Russians.
The project didn't work either, so that also is a victory for the West, because Russia has been trying to undermine key Western institutions that are not just French or German or American, but Western institutions.
Folks, they're all bad actors, folks.
And this did not work here in France. Anna?
We know Le Pen, by her supporters, was seen as tougher on terrorism than Macron. So what's the impact of Macron's victory when it comes to the fight against ISIS, the war on terror?
Well, you know, her voters may have thought that, but actually Macron once did belong to Hollande's government. Yes, he stepped down, he created his own independent movement en marche, but Hollande has, since the terrible terrorism attacks in first Charlie Hebdo and then in the Bataclan over the 2015, state of emergency, which is still in effect, but also they learned very, very strong and important lessons. And they have reorganized the anti-terrorism force, reorganized the intelligence sharing, and many, many other issues. And they've made leaps and bounds according to the politicians here. So actually,
He's part of Hollande, but he's not a socialist. I don't think so. From what I've heard, anyways.
Doesn't have any deputies to speak of in the Legislative Assembly, maybe one or two, and has never been in government. So that was Project Fear, if you like. But it's true that there's been such a Project Fear because of the terrorism in this country. That in itself was a victory, that people came out in the numbers they did and did not vote for the candidate who was drumming up the fear, and who did vote for the candidate who was pledging to reform and to look forward and to go forward strong but together rather than divided and weaker.
I mean, we can't underscore enough the
Did that sound familiar? Stronger together. I wonder who said that.
only failure of the far right in France, but really another failure of the far right in the much broader picture. The Dutch people largely rejected a far right movement, so did the Australians. Does this defeat of the far right, the Austrians, not Australians, but does this defeat of the far right there in France essentially kill nationalism and that wave that has begun?
You know,
Nationalism and racism and whatever.
that we've seen has sort of been stalled here in France, and probably because France is so important, such a big country, it means that it won't come up in other big, powerful European countries. It still exists in some of the East European countries that are part of the EU, but for instance in Germany, we saw a rising, far-right party coming up, Nationalist Party, AfD. That already has started to crumble. And if Angela Merkel is going to face any threat, it's more going to be on her more socialist flank. So, and she herself anyway, her party is coming up stronger right now. So that particular project has hit a brick wall at the moment. But
I don't think so. The socialists, you don't have to worry about the socialists, I think. I think they're wrong about that.
For either the extreme right or the extreme left. That's 40% of the French voted extreme parties in the first round. And now in the second round, more than 60%, some 65 according to the latest figures. They're not fully accounted yet, but this is pretty much it. 65 point something have gone to Macron, 34-ish have gone to Marine Le Pen. It's still more than the far-right party has ever received before. So those issues are still there. And the challenge ahead is the economy, is employment, and is also in healing the fractures inside this culture. And there really are, whether it's urban and rural, whether it's, the immigrant population or not, and they need to be healed, and Macron said he's going to try to do that.
Christiane Amanpour from Paris tonight, thank you. Still ahead this hour,
folks.
the President and House
That's about
Republicans
it,
consider
folks.
health care